Chris slid under the table and jumped forward, hearing the sound of the wooden structure being destroyed behind him. He turned just in time to see the table broken in half and Krauser already in the air towards him. Redfield lowered his body and threw himself to one side, seeing Krauser destroy the concrete wall with ease. Turning his body sideways, he throws a stun grenade on the ground and runs towards where his weapons had been thrown. The grenade explodes. He kills Krauser and Grunt as he jumps to the ground, letting himself slide across the dusty concrete, picking up the revolver shortly afterwards. He kneels and reloads his gun, his eyes immediately going to Krauser as Chris gritted his teeth as a huge chunk of concrete was being thrown in his direction. He jumped to the side, but before he can even process what was happening, he was forced to roll to the side as Krauser tried to pierce his chest with its huge claw. Chris kicked Krauser in his chest and retreated, making his way back to the abandoned factory. He had noticed the fallen bodies of countless infected and realized that 2 people were missing. However, he didn't have time for that. Krauser broke through the concrete wall with extreme ease and Chris fired. However, the infected man dodged as he could see the bullets approaching. His speed was even greater than before, so fast it was almost like a semi-teleportation. His body was just a blur as he moved. Krauser flexed his huge arm, and Chris gritted his teeth again. In a blink of an eye, the ex-military man was already in front of him, trying to pierce his chest again. Redfield barely managed to dodge, feeling the side of his torso slashed and his tactical vest torn with ease. Grunting, he grabs Krauser's neck and sticks the barrel of his revolver into his stomach, firing. Krauser roared loudly in pain and broke free of Chris's grip, turning his body and landing a kick to Redfield's stomach, which was thrown backwards, literally flying a few dozen meters. Chris grunted as he felt his body bounce twice as he rolled onto the ground for a few more meters. He shook his head and quickly stood up, his eyes staring into Krauser's angry ones. Well, despite the situation, he knew what he had to do. Krauser was too fast for his shots, but his arm was too big. In other words, he needed a bit of room to move, and what Chris could do to come to face with them. Despite being incredibly fast, Krauser didn't dodge a single shot at close range. Great, now he just needed to get it close while avoiding being impaled by that arm. Krauser advanced towards him, tried a low kick, which Chris dodged by jumping backwards. Krauser then, still in momentum of his movement, turned his body at the same time, and stood up as he tried a vertical slashing attack from below. Chris gritted his teeth and dodged, throwing his torso backwards. Then he countered a punch to Krauser's face, who in turn turned his body and tried to slash Chris's face, who gritted his teeth and he felt like the middle of his nose being cut and blood dripping down his face. Chris gritted his teeth and spun around to land a kick in Krauser's stomach, who grunted in pain and quickly ignored it. Grabbing Redfield's leg, the ex-military man tried to pierce Chris's torso, who immediately imitated Krauser's previous move and jumped to his other leg, landing a kick on Krauser's face, which ended up releasing his leg. Chris then turned to the ground and fired at Krauser. Because the man hadn't recovered quickly enough, he was hit twice, once on the side of his stomach and once on his arm in an attempt to defend himself from the shots. Krauser roared and advanced towards Chris again, trying to decapitate him. Chris ducked, dodging the attack, but before he could do anything, Krauser grabbed him by the neck. Chris was quicker and shot Krauser in the leg, who grunted loudly and knelt down his stricken leg. Chris then got up and fired once more at Krauser, who gritted his teeth and landed a kick to the side of Chris's body, who was thrown out of the factory and into the concrete floor of the abandoned street. Chris rolled on the ground for a few times and gasped heavily. His ribs were cracked for sure. He quickly opened one of his pockets of his tactical vest and drank the mixture of herbs, feeling his body heat up shortly afterwards from the sudden burst of energy rushed through him. He stood up in the same time at Krauser and leapt towards him once again. Chris jumped to the side and rolled on the ground. He quickly got up and fired, but grunted in annoyance when he saw that he ran out of bullets. Krauser grabbed the carcass of the car next to him and threw it towards Chris, who ran to the side along the ground, dodging the huge metal structure. Just before he could get up, Krauser was already in front of him. Its huge arm was raised to kill him. Chris dodged as he crawled backwards, blinking a few times as he saw Krauser's claw pierce the concrete between his legs. Chris moved to the side and kicked Krauser's leg. He then turned to his body and supported himself with one arm, landing a kick to the side of the enemy's neck. Krauser grunted and also turned his body, hitting Chris once again, with a kick to the chest, throwing Redfield back into the abandoned factory. Chris rolled onto the ground and grunted in pain and irritation. He punched through the ground in anger and his eyes focused on something ahead. The body of the huge creature was lying a few meters away. It was right next to the quad launcher. He got up and ran over to the weapon, pleased to see that there were still 3 rockets inside. Krauser re-entered the factory, only to be greeted by an explosion right behind him. He screamed in pain from the impact and he was thrown forward, falling to the ground shortly afterwards. After soon he recovered and jumped to the side, dodging yet another rocket. He growled and then ducked, feeling the last of Chris's rockets explode right behind him. Chris lowered his quad launcher and faced Krauser, who did the same. "Are you done, Chris? No matter what you do, you're not going to win. None of those shots hit me? You have had enough this game?" he asked angrily, and Chris spread his arms and shrugged. "It depends. I wasn't aiming at you." Chris said that. As soon as he did, Krauser's eyes widened slightly and looked up, only to be thrown into the ground. A part of the roof above had collapsed on his head. Chris ran to the side and picked up his pistol, which had fallen to the ground, quickly reloaded his mag and shot Krauser, who was still trying to get up. His bullets hit his shoulder and neck and head. It was impressive that Krauser just wouldn't die. The man finally managed to get up from and threw a piece of debris towards Chris, so fast and hard that all he could do to defend himself was put his arms right in front of his body. He grunted as he was hit and fell to the ground, but soon got up only to be punched in the face that sent him crashing down to the ground again. Krauser tried to punch him, only for the punch to ground once more. Chris then grabbed Krauser's head with his legs, starting to strangle him while holding his huge arm. Krauser grunted and due to somewhat of an unfavorable position. He couldn't pierce Chris with his arm, so he started punching the side of Chris's torso with another, only for Chris to shoot him in the head a few more times before he ran out of bullets. Blood dripped from Chris's eyes, blocking his vision, and soon he began to get up and fall to the ground again. Chris began to spit blood and his back hit the ground. However, his grip only grew stronger as the adrenaline rushed through his body. Krauser screamed as he got up and ran towards the next wall, and they both went for the concrete quickly due to the force imposed, and fell to the ground next to each other. Chris coughed a couple times, feeling the metallic taste of blood even stronger in his mouth. His eyes widened when he saw Krauser still turn around, still on the ground, and tried to cut off his head with his huge claw. Chris takes the momentum of what was left of the wall sides to sides, and then throw one of his grenades to the ground and takes cover by a nearby rubble. The grenades explode and knocks Krauser backwards, causing him to collide with the wall and fall to the ground. Chris quickly got up and ran towards Krauser. After picking up his machete again, he threw himself onto the man's back and stabbing him viciously. Muscles, arteries, bones, blood splattered on Chris's face, but he just ignored it. When he finally stopped stabbing Krauser, he was panting, stained with blood and sweat. He got up and saw Krauser's head roll to the side. It had been a tough fight. He could feel some of his bones being broken, although the pain was somewhat muffled due to the herbal mixture. He grunted slightly and started to move. His footsteps echoed through the empty space. The silence that filled the area was almost deafening. He reloaded his pistol and walked over his eyes to see his rifle lying on the ground. Krauser's knife had been destroyed as the barrel of the weapon. It was probably useless. Well, he took the rifle anyway and put it on his back. It might be useless at the moment, but maybe it was still salvageable. He could check at the kendo store. Chris grunted again and grabbed 2 of his items from his tactical vest. He already drunk the herbal mixture, but he was walking around with exposed wounds, and that was not a good idea. He knelt on the ground and took a deep breath, pouring some saline solution onto his wounds and face, wiping away the blood with some extra bandages. He then bandaged his nose and cuts on his face. Great, more scars. He didn't care much about his appearance, but if he carried on like this, he would have a face left. He quickly turned to his side and heard his footsteps approaching, pointing his pistol at whoever it was. The only sigh of relief when he saw it was Parker, with his rifle pointed to him. Geez, Redfield, did you lose that fight against that boulder? He joked. Chris snorted a nasal laugh and sprang to his lips. Fuck you, LouizSt. He sneered his last name, and Parker snorted, taking a step closer when his eyes ran around. Holy shit, that was quite a fight, he said, looking at Crosser's decapitated head lying a few pieces away. Where's Jill? Chris asked, looking around briefly. She's going to meet Ghost. He found your sister, Parker said, waving for Chris to start following him, just before they started walking in the direction they had came. He found Claire? How is she? Chris asked, limping towards as he followed Parker at the fast pace. He was still panting and doing his best to ignore the pain in his body. Apparently she's fine. We've arranged a meet up at the top of the building nearby. They should be expecting us by now. Chris sighed in relief, running a bloody hand through his hair as he walked. The adrenaline had left his body, and he felt a little heavy-eyed. That's great, good. What about Sherry? Parker tensed a little. We haven't heard from her yet. I hope Jill does when we get there, Parker said. In a matter of moments, Chris felt his body alert again. It took them a few minutes to climb up and walk to the meeting point. They climbed a staircase that was in an alleyway on the side of the building they had chose. As soon as they climbed up, Chris's eyes immediately met Claire's. The woman rushed towards Chris. The woman ran towards Chris and hugged him. Although he was wounded, he didn't refuse the embrace. He held back a groan of pain when she squeezed him. Claire, don't you ever think about doing that again, he said as he hugged her, hearing his small muffled laugh. You say that as if I'd let them kidnap me. Just so you know, I was caught by surprise, she said, undoing the hug much to Chris's relief on his wounds. I don't know. I guess we'll have to get you back in your training, he said. He smiled as a mixture of relief and concern. You look awful, he smiled. Well, should have seen the other guy, he said, watching Jill approach. Are you all right? She asked, and he nodded in confirmation. It's safe to assume that Crosser is dead. Dead? More impossible, Parker said, who answered, taking the seat next to the small wall next to him. Where's Sherry? Chris asked, looking around and noticed that there was no one other little girl was missing. We heard her on the radio. Apparently she was in trouble. Ghost went to her, Jill explained, and Chris gasped again. Well, if he managed to get Claire back in one piece, maybe he didn't have to worry so much. No frickin' way. He always worried. Where did he go? We can go now, he said in response, received sharp looks from both Jill and Claire. With those injuries? No way. Sit down and we'll take care of it, Claire said, and Chris rolled his eyes. If you say you're fine, I'll break the bones that aren't broken. Sit down. We don't know what else is in this place, Jill said, and Chris blinked at Parker as he laughed a little. It didn't seem that he had much to say in the matter. Ghost ran towards the building ahead. He jumped from the rooftop and grabbed onto the window of the abandoned apartment, quickly pulled himself up and propels himself to the window, holding the metal just above the balcony in another apartment above. He thrusts his body forward and lets go of the metal. In air, he turns his body and grabs it just below the balcony railing, propelling himself upwards again. At the top of the railing, he jumps up and pushes himself onto the building. He then ran towards the shots that were getting louder and louder. Jumping onto another building, he approached, and the edge of the looked like a warehouse. The place was abandoned, just like any other place that was a ghost town. There was a hole in the rooftops of the doors that were smashed in. Considering the noise, he'd say that monster was chasing Sherry. Ghost looked around, and there were no other infected around, which was good. But Sherry was trapped in that place with a creature yet is unknown, perhaps with some infected in there which sucked. He ran to the side and jumped onto the roof next to the building. Running, he jumped almost 20 meters onto the roof of the warehouse below. rolling around as soon as he hits the metal. He soon gets up and runs towards the hole. As he looks down, he sees Sherry shooting at a hooded, huge creature in stained black clothes, carrying a huge hammer. The weapon was so big and heavy that the creature was actually dragging it. The thing had pieces of metal stuck all over its back. Sherry was a dozen pieces ahead, firing with its rifle. The bullets seemed to have no effect. As soon as the creature leapt towards her, there were bodies of the infected lying in the warehouse. Proving right. A few dozen meters to Sherry's left were some kind of infected. One of them with a large axe in its hand and a metal cage in its head. It all made sense that she had been chased. There were a lot of infected, and some of them looked quite tough. He jumped down, landing on one of the metal beams that supported the roof. He walked along the metal until he just stood there above the hooded creature. He jumped down with his knife and landed on the huge infected's back, thrusting the blade into its neck with some violence. The creature staggered forward as Ghost stabbed the side of the thing's neck. However, the infected was clever, as it quickly dropped the sledgehammer and grabbed Ghost, pulling him off its back. But before the creature could crush him, Ghost grabbed his Desert Eagle and fired it at the infected's head, which was stunned by the shots and let go. He then rolled backwards as he unloaded the clip from his Desert Eagle. He then picked up his rifle and heard Sherry's footsteps coming up beside him. "Ghost," she said, aiming her rifle at the infected in front of her. But as soon as she was forced to turn around, another infected watched from between them, and the shelves were still standing. "Are you all right?" he asked, glancing at her. "Yes, what's the plan?" she asked, firing at the infected that was in front of her, and Ghost watched the huge creature in front pick up the hammer once more. The thing just stared at them, as if it was analyzing them. Curious. "I'll take care of the big guy. You take care of those infected. When you see the chance, you get out of there," he said, and he widened her eyes slightly. "You're kidding, right? The other infected are in the building in the northeast from there. There's a staircase in the alleyway. They're probably waiting for you." He ignored her, running towards the hooded creature, giving her no chance to say anything else. As he approached, the huge infected swung its hammer horizontally, trying to smash Ghost against the wall. However, the agent threw himself forward and let himself slide to the door. Beneath the attack, the hammer hit and destroyed the wall, as the same as Ghost got up and shot the infected in the head with his rifle. The infected then landed a punch to the side of Ghost's torso, which was thrown to the side, much to his surprise. He quickly got up, gritting his teeth in pain and surprise. Damn, that thing hit hard. The infected then raised its hammer and tried to smash the agent, who dodged to the side and felt the whole place shake with its blow. He looked away. Sherry dodged the axe attack from another infected, while killing another next to her. She could handle herself. The infected brain bandaged its hammer again, and the agent dodged as he ducked. He fired again at the creature, ignoring all the bullets hitting its body, grabbed the shelf next to it, and threw it towards Ghost. The agent, realizing that the thing's intent, ran to the side and jumped forward, slid across the floor, hearing the shelf being destroyed as it hit the ground. He then threw a stun grenade at the huge creature's feet. The grenade exploded and the infected stepped back a few steps. Ghost unloaded the magazine of his rifle into the monster's head, which it didn't fall. The infected, which roared loudly, grabbed the hammer with one hand and started running towards the agent. Ghost advanced it as the creature as well. When he got close enough, he stopped running and jumped to the side, causing the creature, despite trying to stop running as well, crashed into the wall in the corner of the warehouse. The side of the warehouse fell on the creature and some other infected. However, Ghost could see the creature begin to rise from the ground. "Sherry, go!" he shouted to the girl, who alternated her gaze between him and the fallen creatures, but after a sigh and regret, began to run towards the warehouse exit. Ghost ran towards the infected while holding his rifle. The incendiary ammunition was starting to burn parts of the infected's clothes. The creature roared and threw its hammer at the agent, who dodged it by ducking. Kneeling, he fired at the infected, who began to approach at a heavy pace. The infected then grabbed one of the metal stakes attached to its body and raised its arm. Ghost quickly prepared to dodge the blow, but to his surprise, the monster simply kicked the wooden shelf next to him, throwing a few pieces of wood towards the agent, who, caught by surprise, could only put his arms in front of the body as a form of protection. As he recovered, but not quickly enough, his eyes widened as this creature brandished its place against the metal of his body. Ghost gritted his teeth and tried to dodge, only to have the side of his abdomen pierced by the heavy metal. He grunted as he was hit, but he ignored the pain as he fired again. The creature was still of its hand in metal, grabbed the agent with both of his other hand, and lifted him into the air. The monster violently removed the metal from his body and flexed his arm backwards, ready to pierce the agent's skull. However, Ghost was quicker and threw a stun grenade at the ground, causing the creature to let go of him. Feeling the adrenaline rush through his body, he picked up the piece of the metal that had fallen on the ground and plunged it into the creature's head. The monster dropped to its knees, but it didn't fall, tries to grab the agent. However, Ghost takes a step back and jumps onto the infected's shoulder, driving the knife into the side of the monster's neck, and grabbing another of the metal stakes struck to the thing's back. He then drove another piece of metal into the infected's head, which was propped up by its elbows, but still didn't fall. Grunting angrily, Ghost turned to his knife in hand and began viciously stabbing the creature's head, opening the deformed skull and destroying its brain. The creature finally fell. Taking a single deep breath, Ghost got off the thing. He wipes the blood off of his knife and puts the blade back in its sheath. He looking down to see blood dripping from his wound. While it didn't seem to hit much more organs, that would be fatal. If he got infected, the little bit of the G-virus in his body, strengthened over the years, had prevented that. He looked around, made sure there was no one nearby, and then he began to remove his tactical vest. Sherry threw her knife at the head of the infected that had attracted by the shots. She ran over, kneeling to the body of the dead infected, and used it as a stepping stone. After picking up her knife, leaping towards another infected, further back, and plunging the blade into the thing's head. She kicked the infected's body to the ground and sighed, wiping the blood off of her knife. She could take care of herself. She was skilled, although she was capable. She knew that, so why didn't that guy just let her help? She was tired of letting things fight others for her. Chris hadn't trained her for that long, so he acted like she was going to get in his way or something. Hell, he treated her like a child. Rolling her eyes, she turned around and ran back towards the warehouse. No chances of leaving him to fight alone again. Alright, she understood that he was skilled. Hell, maybe even one of the most skilled agents that she'd ever met. Maybe he already killed that thing. But that didn't mean that he had to do everything alone. Face everything alone. She could have helped. Make things a little easier, perhaps. She entered the warehouse and walked around the place. Everything was silent. She ran her eyes around, looking at the broken shelves and racks. That thing's hammer was on the side of the warehouse on the other side, laying on the floor beneath the slightly destroyed wall. Until her eyes focused on the fallen creature up ahead, a sigh escaped her lips. Of course he would have killed that thing by now. He did that for a living. Taking a few steps closer, she found him up ahead. He was wounded. His tactical vest as well as some of his weapons were on the ground. He only had his pistol on his waistband, and he cleaned up the wound on his abdomen. He had been on his back to her, and he ran her eyes over the numerous scars, claws, bites, punctures, lacerations. Hell, he must have suffered a huge lot on missions. How much he had been hit, beaten, and bruised. If you think about it, his life was pretty sad. He did nothing but face biological weapons, day after day. She swallowed some saliva as she approached. She turned to pick up some bandages. The girl's eyes widened slightly as she felt her body locked up. Just like his back, his torso was marked by scars, gunshots, and marks and cuts. However, there was one scar in particular that made the girl's lungs run out of air. 3 claw marks were on his chest, long marks, from the top to the parietal and then below the pectoral. They were all long since healed. Those claws were unique. She recognized them instantly. A mark that made them encounter with the liquor. A long time ago she would have never forget. no matter how much time passed. How could she? She found herself touched those marks, and she had asked herself about him. She had helped herself cover the bandages before they had left that hotel. She started to gasp a little. Her hands felt shaky. Like Claire, as time went on, she began to talk less and less about the incident. Raccoon City was like a taboo for them. No matter what they suffered together, the city would always be marked as the worst trauma of their lives. Perhaps it was because the first event of its kind for both of them. But since she saw those familiar scars, everything began to make sense. Feelings that she had tried to bury began to reappear. Everything made sense. All the sudden disappearance, the anonymous email to Chris, the disappearance of the unknown agent for a few years, his acknowledge of names, that familiar feeling he passed on. She was right all along. And without realizing it, she felt something run down her face. The girl raised her hands to her cheeks, wiping away the tears that began to drip on the floor. She didn't want to cry. She had cried too much years ago. But how could she not? Knowing one of the greatest saviors of her life was right in front of her, the person who had stayed for such a short time, but made a huge impact on her development. How could she hold back her tears, knowing that Leon had been right by her side the whole time?